Good morning on this 4th of March, 2024. We're going to talk today about something happening outside the United States. I'm aware that the story of the Sanctus Ranch has kind of begun spreading into some Catholic media, and I will definitely cover that probably tomorrow. But there's a story brewing in Spain, in the Spanish speaking world, that is definitely worth your attention. And if you've ever wondered why Catholic priests will often not talk about the crisis in the church, or even ones are aware and share generally our feelings about things, or have maybe more radical feelings than some of us do, that they don't publicly share them. They don't use their teaching authority to really dive into these problems. If you want to know why that is, I have a great story for you today. So, these priests that we're going to talk about today probably need your prayers, but also there's a question here of prudence. And I'm going to ask you a very basic question. I feel free to let me know in the live chat what you think about this as this goes on, and in the comment section later for those watching this after the live stream. Let me know if you think the priests here acted imprudently, because they said something that they kind of said was a joke, and it just caused a firestorm in Spain and by extension the Spanish speaking world, because there aren't very many Spanish language YouTube channels out there talking about the faith from a traditionalist perspective, teaching the actual faith, giving you the news like I do here. And these are priests doing it. It involves a channel called the Sacristy of the Vendée. Well, that's its name translated into English. The Vendée has to do with, if you're not familiar with Catholic history, during the French Revolution, there were some Catholics in rural France who absolutely objected to what was going on with the monarchy and Robespierre and all the rest, and they resisted, and they are martyrs for what they have done. And their name is the Vendée has become associated with Catholic resistance in general. And the Spanish priests have this Sacristy of the Vendée YouTube channel, and I'll show you it briefly here in a minute. But they said something rather imprudent, possibly, depending on your perspective on this. So let's go first to the very basic, one of the very few English language reportings I've seen on this, and this came from a Bergoglian friendly website. So bear that in mind. But then again, most of the news sites I cite are. So you get this from You Catholic. It happened a few days ago. Archbishop rebukes priest for inappropriate remarks about Pope Francis. Remarks were inappropriate, is kind of putting it mildly. So an amazing amount of restraint here in that headline, as you'll see. Archbishop Francisco Chado Chavez of Toledo has recently publicly criticized a group of priests for their inappropriate remarks concerning Pope Francis. The controversy arose from a conversation on the Sacristy of the Vendée, a YouTube show where priests from various Spanish-speaking countries gather to discuss religious, social, and political topics. During one of their discussions, a priest from Toledo made a comment about praying for Pope Francis, quote, to go to heaven as soon as possible, a sentiment that was met with laughter and support from his colleagues. See where this might be a problem. Archbishop Chavez was quick to address the issue, issuing a statement on the Archdiocese's website to express his profound rejection of the disrespectful comments. He emphasized that such remarks do not reflect the position of the Archdiocese and hinted at potential corrective measures against the priest involved. The Archbishop urged the priest to seek forgiveness and show respect and affection towards Pope Francis and his ministry. Afterwards, the Sacristy of the Vendée group took to their X, meaning Twitter, platform account to issue an apology. They clarified that the comment was intended to be humorous and did not genuinely wish for the Pope's passing. Despite the attempt at clarification, they acknowledged the poor taste of the joke and reiterated their loyalty to Pope Francis and the Catholic Church. Pray for Pope Francis. Okay, I wish that was accurate. It sort of is accurate, but this is a bigger story than that, and this is why I have several Spanish language articles here from Info Vaticana to go over. But first, I'm going to show you the Sacristy of the Vendée website. It's Spanish language YouTube channel. That's not the one I'm trying to show you. That was the wrong one. All right, let's try this again. There it is, Sacristy of the Vendée. So you see, again, it's Spanish language. We've got here, I mean, these are just regular videos. They haven't done a regular video in a few months, but if you go to their live streams, they had one 3 days ago. They had one 10 days ago. I'm not sure which one is the one they did this on, but they're fairly active. And so if you're looking for Spanish language content, you can find it here. They have 70,000 subscribers, which in the sort of, if you want to put them in their recognize and resist group, that puts them as not exactly a small channel because we're talking about a niche thing here, but also they're Spanish language. So they have the potential to have an enormous amount of reach. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, you can find them there. These are mostly priests and deacons, and the rest, at the very least, traditionally minded, if not dedicated necessarily to the traditional sacraments. I'm not that concerned about that with this story, though. Let's get a little bit more details here. So we have the response from the diocese. Let's see. Just quickly checking the chat. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to just go right here to the Archdiocese's response. This is from Info Vaticana. These are all Spanish language articles. I'm using Google Chrome to translate them for you so that we can, get a working translation. So the headline here is the Archdiocese of Toledo threatens the priests of the Sacristy of the Vendée with taking, quote, corrective measures. They never really tell you what these corrective measures are, but let's take a look here. The Archdiocese of Toledo has issued a statement to comment on the controversy promoted and encouraged by the media of the Ecclesio Progredio following statements made on the YouTube program La Sacristy de la Vendée. As happens in these cases, the morbidity of the topic has attracted the attention not only of the national media in Spain, but has crossed borders, even sports media like Marca Vecca the News. So imagine if a couple of priests had an English language YouTube show and they said something like this about Francis, and then ESPN reported on it. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Faced with pressure from the media, the Archdiocese, led by Cheto Chavez and its auxiliary bishop and general secretary, Cesar Garcia Magan, have decided to threaten these priests with disciplinary measures in an attempt to silence them. In the statement issued by the Archdiocese of Toledo, they express their deep rejection of any manifestation of disaffection towards the person and ministry of the Holy Father. The Archdiocese of Toledo affirms that priests have been informed of the need to ask forgiveness for such statements that harm the communion of the church. This is a harm of unity. Again, you see this a lot lately, and scandalize the people of God. On the other hand, the Archbishopric of Toledo clarifies, quote, it is not responsible in any way for the statements made on that YouTube channel, which does not in any way represent the communication of this particular church. And when they say the particular church, they mean the Church of Spain. We reiterate and ratify the calls for effective and effective communion with the successor of Peter that both the Archbishop and his auxiliary bishop have made on various occasions in recent months. They're accusing them of basically being schismatic with that statement. In this sense, the Archdiocese of Toledo assures that other corrective measures are not excluded with respect to those who are called to be ministers of Christ at the service of unity and evangelical life in the Church, avoiding all conduct that contradicts their state. Finally, they thank the work and dedication that has always distinguished the diocesan presbytery to promote communion and affection for the successor of Peter, the holy people of God who walk in Toledo. So they're basically being accused of being schismatic because of the things they said. They're accused of harming communion of the church and making sure the bishops there want to make sure everybody knows their position is not that of the position of the church in Spain. These corrective measures are they never tell you what they might be. Now, we've seen when sometimes priests speak up about these things, at least in America and Western Europe, that they are removed from active ministry. That could be the implication here because it's not exactly hidden that this happens to people. Lizette says scandal. What about the priest who was in Spain who was caught with who had a romantic partner and they were distributing not legal things? Yes, right. We'll go into that. Actually, trust me, that hasn't been missed. We will definitely go into that because this is not just. That's not all that this has happened with this. When priests speak out against the errors of our times, this is what happens to them, though. The bishops always come down on them in some way. This is just very high profile because it happened on YouTube. It's why everything you see in this resistance to things going on with Francis, the vast majority of it are done by laity and by bishops, because bishops have at least a little more independence than priests do, but by the laity, who most of the bishops so far anyway haven't taken to threatening excommunication or anything like that against. It is frankly miraculous that these priests are still in active ministry. That might change shortly. Now, the next part about this, is that we have another interesting figure decided to sort of chime in. And so you get this from Info Vaticana, published on the same day or thereafter. Sister Lucia Karam loses her mind and calls the priest of the Sacristy of the Vendée redacted and imbeciles. Now, that's I've heard a nun use language like that once before in my life, and it happened in person. But she was using what we'll call excretory language to describe an idea as being basically like the solid waste from a bull, because sometimes, as she said, some things are just, well, the word she used. But she never used that language to describe people, let alone priests. In fact, frankly, I say some pretty harsh things about modernist priests and modernist bishops all the time. I don't think I've ever said something like that. It just goes to show how cultural norms regarding strong language are different from country to country. But here's what she said. Quote, "It's what was missing to join the party. Puddle you see, puddle you get into. The talkative Argentine nun has insulted the priest of the Sacristy of the Vendée in a video uploaded to her TikTok account." I want to pause right here. You know, a lot of religious are barely on social media, and if they are, it's community access. So I'd like maybe they have some access to things. It's always in community. The nuns being on TikTok, that's such a weird idea. Very weird idea. I will say this much for her. That's identifiably a nun from her habit. So I will give credit where it's due. In this day and age, that's a big deal that she's wearing a habit. Let's continue. Sister Lucia Karam has shared through her Twitter X account, "Those priests who pray for the Pope to pass, what idiots. Let them start working and stop so much nonsense," the nun wrote in the tweet and which she shared in her video. So she's making these public harsh statements as public as she can possibly do it. In the video that lasts just 20 seconds, the controversial nun begins by saying, quote, "Jesus says that he who does not work should not eat." With bragging and cockiness, she assures that, quote, "there is a group of priests who pray for Pope Francis to pass," in reference to statements taken out of context by a priest who regularly participates in this evangelizing program on YouTube. The Argentine nun sends a message to these priests and asks them to get to work and stop talking about so much stupidity. And since they don't work, don't eat and fast and give little meaning to your life, says the nun, who concludes her intervention by saying, "How many idiots there are out there," in clear allusion to the priest of the Sacristy of the Vendée, to whom she dedicates the video with insults and expletives. Will Karam be called to order by her bishop for publicly insulting a group of priests? No, she won't be. I mean, come on. She's taking the side of the Bergoglians against words you can argue easily were imprudent of priests. But she's doing so in a way that I think is far worse, because there is a certain decorum we expect of nuns. And that decorum doesn't typically involve that kind of language. It doesn't involve that kind of rhetoric. And I'm not one normally to tone police, but I think it goes without saying that most of the time, most nuns are expected to be kind of calm, peaceful people. Exceptions, sure. Mother Angelica comes to mind, but Mother Angelica was defending the orthodoxy of the faith against the errors of our time. Oh, I can't say that for this nun, but then again, I don't know the nature of her rest of her work. I like to give her the benefit of the doubt because I have a bias towards nuns in general. Raven Ray says, "Why does she even have a social media account from the country behind the right?" Um, yeah, why does she have that? Why does she have from that company? Because it's where young people are. There are actual fair number of Catholics, including some traditionalists, who are on who are on TikTok, and they are trying to spread the gospel there. For better or worse, I'm not there. I've been told by people I should go there, but 1 minute long content's not my thing. So you don't see me doing YouTube shorts very often. Um, the look on Sister's face reminds me of Cardinal Fernandez. Yeah. Um, Ashley says the joke was too close to the truth. Right. This is praying that someone goes to their judgment's a little harsh, or joking about it's a little harsh. Um, Sonny Jim says if she isn't sanctioned, then that behavior is de facto proper. Yet it is accepted and endorsed if she isn't. All right. So that's not all. That is not all. So there is an open letter to these bishops from a layman who presumably is there, and he'd had enough. So we're going to go over it. It's not that long of an open letter. It's the open again, Info Vaticana, which seems to be the only. It's like their Info Vaticana are definitely life site news-ish for the Spanish world or something to that akin to that. So here we go. Open letter to the bishops on the Sacristy of the Vendée. From a layman named Diego Lanzas, published that same day. February 29th was a very big day. I sat on this for a few days because I wanted to give this the due it was deserved. It deserved. And I wanted to see if anything new came out of this. And there hasn't been any reporting on this. So please, let's get some reporting on this other than from you, Catholic, because it'd be good. So the statements of the priests that have been echoed by the media have been taken out of context and misinterpreted by the two reference media of ecclesial progressivism in Spain, Vida Nueva and Religión Digital. Their purpose has been none other than to leak them disfigured to the media to coordinate a defamation campaign against said priests and thus annul them because they lack the slightest argument against the truths of the faith, reason, and empirical evidence which they proclaim. In each of his interventions, in none of the different programs on said channel, which have only a formative purpose, has single truth of the Catholic faith been denied. What has been a common practice of new life and digital religion for decades. The author here is saying that those outlets, those Spanish language outlets that are more like America Magazine and the National Catholic Reporter, those kind of outlets, but for Spain, have denied the Catholic faith numerous times. And that's why it's ironic that they're taking these priests to task. Thanks to the fact that everything is recorded in the great archives of newspapers that is the internet, you can also see for yourselves how these media did not spare in launching criticism and slander against John Paul II and Benedict XVI. It has become a common practice during Francis's pontificate for priests, religious, bishops, and cardinals to make public statements against the ancient deposit of faith. I have a video in the works on that for later this week, by the way. No disciplinary measures were taken against those who had uttered them. Keep this in mind when threatening sanctions against priests whose only sin is not fitting in with the dominant narrative of the current pontificate, a situation that did not happen to them with the pontificate of the previous pope. There are thousands of faithful from the wide Spanish-speaking world who are receiving great help from the Sacristy de la Vendée channel, which is why their programs continue to grow in subscribers and views. Unique case within the tiny and, on the other hand, very expensive spectrum of the church's media in Spain. He's saying that most church media in Spain is not orthodox, that they are unique because they offer the traditional faith. Thanks to the work of these priests, the large number of people have recovered their faith in Christian practice, or have not abandoned it when they were about to do so, seeing with great pain the very deep crisis in which the church has sunk in our time. Many priests find in this channel a strength to not fall into the temptation of discouragement and despair, since they are the ones who suffer the most from the animosity of the world, the indifference of some of their parishioners, and the abandonment of their own bishops. On the other hand, they learned a lot due to the remarkable training that their brother priests provide them in their interventions. You, dear bishops, in each of your dioceses are perfectly aware of 1. The priests who habitually practice the James Martin sin and do not take measures against them. 2. Of the priests who do not teach but rather distort the doctrine of the church and do not take measures against them. And 3. Of the priests who sacrilegiously manipulate the sacred liturgy and do not take measures against them. More and more of us faithful observe with enormous suffering the scandalous episcopal double standard. Again, this is a layperson writing this kind of letter to take these bishops to task for going after priests who had an imprudent joke. They really did. And are just coming down on them like the wrath of God, instead of coming down on them on these other priests in their dioceses who do far, far worse things. But again, that's not all. So just briefly checking in here. Ray says, German bishops and their many things. The Jimmy Martins do something heretical. The ladies say Francis never cancels them, but was quick with Strickland. Pope's planner, silence on Francis or urine schism. It's pretty much accurate. I mean, the heresies among clergy and bishops is so in our face. That's the normal standard of things. And that's what's accepted. But you say anything critical of Francis and you are schismatic. It's such a weird time. But again, this stuff isn't new either. I mean, during Benedict's time, James Martin was out there doing his thing. He was. It's just the bishops have always tolerated it. I don't know why that is. Well, I mean, I do know why that is, because many of them are fellow travelers with James Martin on that. That's why you see these kinds of illicit masses you see in their dioceses on that issue, among other things. But the priests here in this story have not been silent. Priest Gabriel Calo Z leaves the enemies of the church on the ground. he he hit back with some good rhetoric on this. Um, yeah, that's the picture we used of him smiling in an interview. I suspect it's a miracle that there's still an active ministry, and I'm glad he's fighting, and I hope he's got the joy of the fight in him. So, Father Gabriel Calo Z, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing horribly, priest of the Archdiocese of Toledo, is the one who has received most of the criticism from the media for the joking comment he made in the Sacristy of the Vendée program last week. A cut of the program, decontextualized, meaning the clip taken out of context, circulated on social networks almost a week after the program aired. This clip was used by Vida Nueva and later by Religion Digital and the rest of the national and even international media to say that these priests were praying for the passing of the Pope. After this controversy, fueled and encouraged by ecclesiastical progress to hide other problems this week, the priests met again yesterday, Thursday, in the program broadcast from YouTube, and which generated great expectation. There was special interest in seeing what the priest had to say after the apologies that were made from the program's Twitter/X account. True to his style, and without letting himself be intimidated, the priest did not hesitate to dismantle the lies and ideological agenda of the enemies of the church. Some criticism were focused on Vida Muerta, new life, and digital heresy, digital religion. I like this priest already. The priest recalled that it is they, the priest of the Sacristy of the Vendée, who defend the traditional understanding of the sacrament of holy matrimony and remain open to life. And instead, it is they, the enemies of the church, who are in favor of divorce because it is modern. He also reminded them that they defend from they reject the Moloch ritual and fight against it and all other versions of it. Again, we have to be very careful with this stuff. Well, they, meaning the modernists, are the ones who favor all these in vogue new variations of the Moloch ritual because they support politicians who are in favor of it. Continuing with his review, Calvo, the priest, affirmed that they are the ones who defend the actual, we'll call them marital faculties, ordered by God, the Creator, and the natural moral law, reproaching them that they are the ones who are in favor of the James Martin sin, artificial barriers to being fruitful and multiplying, and the ideology of the flesh of the day. Furthermore, without mincing words, he acknowledged that they defend Christianity as a political, unitary, traditional, and Hispanic regime. He also valued the work of Francisco Franco, who saved the church from the greatest persecution in its history with thousands of martyrs. The Toledo priest reminded Vida Nueva and Religion Digital that they are in favor of the political and media left, with Jordi Evela, the Castros, yada, yada, yada. He also reproached them for their support of the democratic memory law that seeks to rewrite history. The priest insisted that they are the ones who defend the objective and absolute truth that does exist. On the other hand, the enemies of the church who distribute cards of good and bad priests are those who are in favor of relativism and plurality of opinion, as long as they are not ours, the priest added. He just continued. I mean, he just continues on this and goes like this for a long time. It's wonderful to see him standing up for himself. Now, will there be consequences? Oh, absolutely. I would be surprised if the diocese puts up with this for much longer. There hasn't been any news since this time, though. So my suspicion is the bishops are looking at what they can do canonically and also getting advice on how high profile the story has become. I mean, after all, Spanish language sports stations were even reporting on this to give you an idea of how huge this story has gotten. So there it is, folks. That's where we are. And this is why tomorrow I will probably revisit the Sanctus Ranch story because it has definitely related to this kind of thing. Traditionalist Catholic says there's a Spanish priest who pastors 43 parishes. You would think the bishops of Spain would be more concerned about their vocations numbers instead of this kind of thing and trying to get to the root of it, but they can't get to the root of it because the root of this vocations problem is the modernism and the revolution in the church that happened in the 1960s and 70s. That's why they have no vocations. They don't, at the very least, they could, if they started teaching the traditional faith, nothing else, no other changes necessary, they would probably begin solving this problem to some degree. At least make it so they could keep treading water. But if you have a priest with 43 parishes that he has to administer the sacraments to, it means there are people not getting mass every weekend. All right, folks. Any final thoughts in the comments today? let's see, make a mess is coming home to roost. Yeah, I mean, that's what those priests were doing, right? They were just following Francis's suggestion of going out and making a mess. They were just doing it on YouTube and making him kind of the butt of the mess jokes he was making. Men don't respond to the modernist program. I mean that's true at the end of the day. It's true. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. And pray for these priests, pray for the bishops we talked about here, pray for that nun, because as you know, that if we speak ill of anyone, we should make sure to offer a prayer for them. If anybody stirs up ill feelings towards us when we or internally when we go over these stories, we should make sure to say a prayer for them so we can keep things charitable as we can. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in, and as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.